Good afternoon, everyone.
Yeah.
We want to welcome you to this panel debate on content security. My name is Linda Rossner. I'm the CEO of Artisans PR. And this panel is called Your Risk, Your Reputation, Security from the Perspective of Industry Professionals. And first I'd like to introduce the panelists. On the far right is Mathew Gilliat Smith. He is the CEO of Fortium, a digital media security specialist working with leading TV and film studios. He's the co-founder of Fortium Technologies and has led the company to be a market leader in creating unique security products that help protect TV and film studios in the sensitive, complex stages of pre-release. With 25 years' experience in the media and entertainment sector, he has built up strong relationships with the industry, working closely with the technical operations, anti-piracy, and post-production teams at NBC Universal, Disney, Sony Pictures, and Lionsgate, to name a few. And Mathew is a strong advocate of encryption at rest in the workplace. And next to Mathew is Tom Ohanian. He's an accomplished strategist, designer, and inventor of digital media products and workflow solutions. Drawing upon his 29 years in the digital media industry, his designs and efforts in product creation and evangelization have led to the widespread adoption of digital non-linear video and film editing systems, workflow strategies, and LAN and WAN digital media collaboration. Also, I'd like to note, Tom is an Academy Award winner and a 2-time Emmy recipient for scientific and technical invention. And next to Tom is Michael Phillips, Creative Technical Officer of Hula Post and co-founder of Source Digital. And Michael spent more than 2 decades at Avid as part of the market solution team for Post and principal product designer. He was a co-inventor of Avid Film Composer and Symphony Lines. He was honored with a Sci-Tech Award and an Oscar as part of the Avid team. I believe that was also with Tom. He won an Innovator of the Year honor from the Mass Media Alliance and holds a dozen patents related to post-production, sound, and interactivity. And then, to my right, is Mike Jackman, Executive Vice President of Post-Production and Worldwide Delivery for Film Nation, overseeing post as well as international delivery, and is also the President of 1.0 Post, an international language versioning company. Michael also serves as co-chairman of the Board of Directors of the New York Production Alliance. Now, before we get started, Mathew Gilliat Smith is going to give us a presentation.
Yeah, I just very quickly thought I would give a quick overview about the state of security concerns at the moment. Just on the screens here, you can see, what is the status now? There's kind of 3 types of threat. There's cybercrime. You've heard about in 2017 a lot of these attacks, ransomware, but also malware getting into a system and being able to worm its way in and being able to take content. The second is conventional theft, where someone on the outside pays someone on the inside and is able to steal some content. A very big title last year that we all heard about was leaked in that way. And then the third is just accidental distribution, where someone has accidentally put the wrong name into the email, where there's a link and the content's downloaded. So a lot of threats out there, but what's the outlook? The outlook is not great, according to the specialists. And they say that there's going to be something like, they say that last year was bad and 2018 is going to be pretty bleak as well. We've had the start of the year with the Intel flaw, and already there's mumblings of issues happening. So when we talk about cyber theft, all I'm going to say is one thing, actually. I'm going to skip to this slide here. Yesterday I was at the Content Protection Summit, and there was a very a good analyst company working with Cisco talking about the threats. And they pulled up two particular slides. They showed the number of companies which had suffered threats, names like Equifax, Deloitte, all these names you heard about last year, where hundreds of millions of records were released into the public domain. And that's pretty startling. And on the right-hand slide, you can see what the statistics are like. Now, what's happening now is that most people think that if you're behind a firewall, that you're pretty safe. But the point of the presentation was that, no, you're not. There's destructive worm and all sorts of threats now which are coming into the networks and worming their way in. And really, frankly, no one is safe now. So we need to look at new methods of protecting. So easier said than done. And hopefully my colleagues here will be sharing their views on this. But you know, putting security in place is not easy. It's a balance between risk and safety. There's no one solution that suits all, and there's all sorts of things to be taken into consideration. But in particular, it's the attitude of the management, the individuals, and so on. The other issue is, how do you keep the awareness levels high? And this sort of graph here shows the peaks of when you have the Sony hack through to the kind of 6 months afterwards where everything had calmed down, and then to 2017 where you have Game of Thrones and Orange is the New Black and Larson, and then a little peak this year where you have the Intel flaw. So in the meantime, when the news wires aren't buzzing, you've got people sort of focusing on other things and not correctly sort of protecting themselves. In security, it's all very well having Fort Knox and you're completely locked at the front door, but if the back door is open, then that's where the vulnerabilities lie, and that is so often the case. I think I'll just skip through these slides because we're running out of time, but let's go into the questions now.
All right, so first question here is, since all the leaks in 2017, what is the current fear factor? And Mike, I think we want to present that to you.
Sure. So I approach this from the perspective of content creation. FilmNation is a producer, financier of original content, as well as a sales agent of content worldwide. So I am overseeing material at the very beginning of its life cycle when it's first being captured, disseminated for viewing, all the way through early cuts, final cuts, distribution of the content. So obviously, the big picture problem, that everyone knows about is a final version of your movie gets out into the world. It has an impact on the value of the film and how many people are watching it and future abilities to sell films. But any version of the movie that gets out is a problem. A distributor is very, very concerned about how a film is presented, how it's messaged, what the marketing campaign is going to be. So if something small leaks that presents the film in a certain way that isn't how the ultimate distributor may want to present it, that's a problem as well. And even, we are very, very conscious of first looks. We don't let a still photograph go out from a film until we are absolutely ready for it. We choose what it is for the same reason. It puts that film, it frames it in a certain way. So, even when paparazzi come around, that's annoying, but we know that those are going to happen and those first looks will get out there. But the formal first looks, you want to control that. So it's the impact it will have on your content, both how it's perceived and obviously your financial impact.
Just a little sub-question for this. How concerned are your clients when they come in? Do they mention security immediately? I mean, how high up on that scale is it
it's
now?
high up, but we are it's our responsibility to protect against theft. So they're looking to us to take care of that. Also, we are financing our own movies, so we are the first one in. So again, we're protecting our own assets. Our international distributors, by the time they get their hands on it, and even our domestics, it's a finished product. Okay. So the earlier part is really protecting it for us.
I'm sorry, Michael, did you want to comment on that?
I was saying from the Hula Post perspective, right, we're servicing clients that are small independents to medium to large studio scale. And you're correct that the expectations are that you're working in a safe environment. Now, if you're working for a Disney or something like that, they do have their rules and regulations, and they'll come and check out every little piece of your editorial rooms. Who's logging in, who's getting in and out of the rooms, even down to removing USBs on the computers or putting USB locks on them. So the concern, at the studio level certainly is very high, as Mike was saying, is you want to control the rollout of your movie for, marketing and the actual delivery of content. But the one challenge that you have that becomes interesting is human nature kind of kicks in. So there is a disciplinary part that people have to be aware of. And if it's difficult to protect, I find the more creative you are, the less they want to deal with it, because they just want to get to what they need to do. And if they have to enter 3 passwords, they're just like, then let's just do it without telling anybody, because they want to get their job done. So I think one of those barriers that you find a lot in the post process is how easy is it to use, and if it's not easy, then you'll find holes in your process. So.
Now, I hate to be doom and gloom here, but exactly how damaging is a leak or a partial leak of premium content? And who would like to take that? I don't know. Tom?
Yeah, I mean, there is no number that you can put on it, because there's no simple metric. How many times was it seen? You can see you can track pirate data. You can see how many times something that was pirated was watched. Doesn't necessarily tell you what it costs, but it absolutely damages the film to some extent. Some territories will feel like it damages them more than others. And domestically, people feel like it has a big impact. Whether that's millions, tens of millions, 50 million. You don't know. It's going to depend on the film. It's going to depend on the size of the leak. It's going to depend on how in demand it is. But it is meaningful to the bottom line of your movie or television show.
Okay. Does anyone else want to add to that, or should we move on?
I think part of the issue is you kind of have minor leaks, or you have leaks that occur and you don't hear about them on the news wires. But when we work with the studios, we tend to hear on the inside. And it's the cost actually of takedown, the cost of disruption, and the time, the effort, and the kind of the risk of reputational loss that is a kind of an unheard of expense. But it's very time consuming. There's whole departments now that are being recruited to manage information security and anti-piracy and things like that. So there is a kind of an increasing budget that has to be put towards this.
And where would you say the biggest vulnerabilities exist? Is in post-production? Is post-production or the weakest part of the chain? As where content has to be moved from one vendor to the next. Tom?
I think certainly, you can institute policies with your ecosystem of post-production partners, whether doing visual effects, whatever they might be. But they might not necessarily have the budgets to implement some of these security procedures. They may be out of date with the latest patches and so forth, and then suddenly you felt that you had vetted them properly, only to find that 1, 2, or more were out of compliance and didn't know they were out of compliance, and so that becomes a vulnerability. No one wants to. I mean, it's devastating to a small, 15, 20 person post-production, company that's taking some shots. It's devastating for them to be implicated in this type of thing, right? But we have to be, there is a reality in terms of the budgets. I think one of the clear things is that security can't be an afterthought. It has to be part of the whole process.
Yes, that's something I believe that we're going to be discussing in just a little while, but it's absolutely a crucial factor.
If I can add to that, actually, something Michael said, there's the higher end creatives are a vulnerability because a director doesn't want to slow down their process to send a cut to a producer who wants to just see it now. So we put systems in place very early on and try to get people used to things so that from the very beginning they have a system. for example, I mean, we use MediaSeal, and it's been very helpful to just get people accustomed that, okay, if I'm going to watch anything, I have to do X, whatever X is. But if they're not accustomed to it, it can be really hard. And they're also sometimes at a level it's very hard to argue with, and that literally just becomes a guy with their computer with cuts of the movie or cuts of the TV show, and then you're having their assistant chase them around to grab it and make sure they don't put it down. So it's a weakness. We're getting better at it because people are more aware of the risk. But
Interesting.
I'm just going to
Sure.
add to that real quick. Is the whether studios know or productions know is editors have to finish their work, and they'll take stuff home with them. And now that's is it more? No one knows about it because they're not really telling anybody, but it can happen that they will just copy some files to a hard drive, and now that hard drive is now vulnerable because has it gone through the proper process of being a transport drive? And if it gets stolen on the way home, he stops at Starbucks, or she stops at Starbucks, what happens, right? So there's so many little holes in the process that you have to kind of plug. Just again, I go back to the human nature thing, is all they're trying to do is not be malicious, they just want to get the work done, but they're not thinking about the ramifications of that process.
Where I
Tom?
think, just to give some perspective on this, those things can be solved, right? I mean, that content can be encrypted for that particular laptop and only play there, et cetera, but it can be an onerous process, right? It adds time. So there are solutions, and there have been solutions to do that, encrypt, uniquely to that particular device, whether it was a removable or whether it was a particular file. From 2001 to 2004, we started seeing products like that coming out. But again, there was an additional time related to encrypting it, for public-private key on that device and so forth and so on. But I do think that there will come a day where, with processing getting faster and faster, as we all know, I think the promise becomes content will be encrypted and decrypted on the fly while you're viewing it, while you're watching it, and at that point, there won't be any onerous process after the fact. It'll just be, allow for this particular person, this particular device. I think if we can get to that point, then we take all of the, friction out of the system.
Matthew, I'm wondering how close Fortium is to developing that.
Well, encryption on the fly is something that we've just developed and launching at this show. It's the methodology to make it, it's two things. One is making it as easy as possible for the editor to self-encrypt his work and to make it as seamless as possible. And so it's all these things are not easy to develop. They're not easy to finesse, but we've got there now, and it's something that we're trying to encourage people and make them aware that these tools do exist and that they should be used. But actually, one of the points that was raised earlier that I think you do have these different silos. You have creatives, editors, you have post people, marketing people, and sometimes there's no actual ownership between the different silos through the life of the project. And what is getting a bit more resonance now is to say to the finance people, you have to, you mandate that to finance this film, it will have a line item of budget for security. And once you have that in place, it means that everybody has to follow the suit. They have to tick the box. They have to do it. The creative has to do it in order to get, their contract completed. And that does seem to have a bit of resonance.
Great, which comes into sort of the next question, which is how seriously does security factor in at the board level? Anybody have experience with that?
Usually it's very serious the day after it happens. Yeah. That's, it's kind of like car insurance and stuff like that, right? You don't need it till you need it, damn it, it's too late.
Right.
So it's really part of the forethought. And then I think the more seamless that integration becomes, or the more seamless the authentication process becomes, where it's not, in addition to password, maybe it's other type of bio-type things where it just becomes part of the DNA of, as you work in the process, starts becoming a lot more interesting as who is engaging with that content and what rights do they have, just as part of being in the same space as that content. So I think there's some interesting stuff that could be done over time to make it just a truly seamless kind of a process. And you also have to have the ability to scale. I think that's the other challenge is some of these productions, somebody's coming in for one day only versus somebody's on for 3 months. A team goes from 10 to 100 back to 10, and how you keep the management side of who are the stakeholders and how are they engaging and knowing their activities just from a reporting perspective is important. Right.
I mean, I thought the Equifax incident, I mean, it wasn't media itself, but it was nevertheless the same thing. The directors of, the board directors of Equifax were aware of a leak for quite some time before it became public. Now, there becomes a fiduciary duty of those directors for being accountable and for making people aware, etc. And I think there's a step change happening now. People beginning to realize that actually this is something they do need to focus on. It's not a nice to have, it's a must have. And the issue of GDPR, which is coming in, it's meant to be enforced by the middle of next month. Where personal data, if it leaks, then your company will be fined 4% of GDP. I mean, that's massive. It's not just Europe, it's any European citizen's details getting leaked. And I think things like that, where there's a fine, is going to make people set up and look differently. But in our book, we tend to find that the people we deal with in the production environments are all absolutely know security, they know what it's all about, but getting the buy-in from the top is often the challenge.
But that item, the GDPR, is getting everyone's attention.
Yeah.
If it's as it's being publicized, because it suddenly changes everything. So the price tag of security is nothing compared to that fine.
Yeah.
And as soon as you start to say, it's 4% of your actual, company's, annual profit, they go, what'd you say?
Yeah.
How? You didn't say 4% of the whole company. They're like, yes. They're like, okay, well, how much is it going to cost to fix this?
Yeah.
I mean, it becomes really simple.
Yeah, exactly.
We have to wrap up here, but I'm just wondering what more can be done to shore up security, training, awareness, campaigns, encryption, watermarking. What can we do? And I'm just wondering about the awareness so that people can, this is what we're doing, part of it. This makes the awareness more, but...
Well, I think it is all about training, awareness, making your teams understand, the vulnerabilities that are there, and following the policy. And it all comes down to, we're all one team, and if one person lets the side down, then everybody's let down. And companies like ours, Fortium, we spend our time explaining or listening to the studios, listening to the content owners, and saying, what is it that you need? And it's great partnership because they are directing us, saying, look, these are the areas of vulnerability. In fact, our Media Seal product was a direct result of NBC Universal on their soundstage, where they said, look, we have these assets, the final cut's done, we're doing the editing, but it's just sitting there in the clear. How do we build a system that can lock this down? And it's those sorts of partnerships, working in collaboration, that I think is how you can put these things together.
I think there were,
Excuse me. To say from, as a service provider, we do see hard drives come back from rentals where the media is still sitting on the hard drives. Now, usually it's the responsibility of editorial to clean drives off before they return, but now you have the trust of your vendor that's going to do that for you. And at least in our case, you're immediately alerted saying, hey, there is media on here. Do you want to come and do it yourself and make sure under, in the vault or not, or we can do it for you. But there is still this trust factor, but those mistakes happen. So, things like Media Seal and stuff, at least even if we got it and we see it on the drives, no one's going to be able to access it. So that is an extra layer that could be offered to, we'll just delete it, that's fine, or reformat drives, but at least the media is safe throughout wherever it might go by mistake, right? And we see some interesting things come in and out of what's left over. And in your case, you own it from the beginning, so it's a different education process.
Still happens.
Still happens.
But yeah, it goes to the point you were saying earlier about 30% of the worst breaches stem from human error, accidental distribution.
And not malicious at all.
Yeah,
pure,
that's right.
There's two Johns or Daves.
I think the way you deal with the human error is certainly, in repose, it's encrypted, right? I mean, Michael and I have experienced things such as, getting to that last Harry Potter films and those disk drives literally being put into a safe with an armed guard, right? a totally different way of solving that problem, right? But I think that when people know that there's a log of file access and who accessed that, and all of that becomes part of a history of, a chain of custody and access, then you start to become aware of what am I doing, and is that appropriate? Because ultimately I know that, my name is attached to that, right? And so I think there are a couple of different things that have to, come together.
Wonderful. Well, I'm afraid we're out of time, but for any of you people, for more information on content security, please go to fortiumtech.com or visit their booth here at the South Upper Hall, 10603. And I'd like to thank Mathew Gilliat Smith, Tom Ohanian, Michael Phillips, and Mike Jackman. I'm Linda Rossner behind the laptop. Thank you very much.